France, July 9, 1944. Smoke clung to the hedgerows like wet rags. The air trembled with the metallic growl of engines. I crouched behind a shattered stone wall on the outskirts of Saint-Marcel, fingers raw from the heat of the G*N barrel I could no longer use. My uniform was soaked through, sweat, rain, and fear blending into one smell I will never forget. Before me sat the wreck of a 57mm anti-tank G*N. Its optical sight was cracked in two, the elevation gear jammed by shrapnel. Behind me, nothing. The crew was gone. The vibration under my boots grew heavier, treads, gears, armor. A German column, moving toward the supply depot half a mile behind me. 5 shells left. No radio. No orders. I remember whispering, almost without sound. If I get one sh*T, I'll make it count. That's how it began, 1 man, 1 broken G*N, and 10 tanks coming out of the fog. Western France, 1 month after D-Day, the paper chain of command stretched across hedgerows it had never seen. Our maps were dry, our boots were not. I was C Company, 320th Infantry, loaned to a depot guard line outside Saint-Marcel because trucks needed a road more than generals needed elegance. The order was simple on paper: hold the junction, pass the fuel, pass the bandages, pass the bread. On the ground it meant this: see nothing, hear everything, and make sure the road breathes by nightfall. Regulations spoke in clean sentences. Anti-tank sections were to fire on direct orders only. Range by the M86 telescope. No discharge if the sight was cracked, fogged, or out of calibration. Conserve ammunition. Do not risk revealing position without an assigned fire plan. The manual's diagrams showed open fields and neat silhouettes, no thorns, no cattle fences twisted into wire nests, no French tractors stalled sideways in the lane with a dead axle and a prayer. Normandy did not read the manual. The bocage broke lines into rooms of earth and leaf. Sound arrived bent and late. Fog pooled in ditches like water. A squad could be 20 paces away and vanish behind a single hedge. Radios chewed on static, then swallowed whole words. I learned to count engines by harmonics and mud by taste. A Panzer IV has a way of carrying its weight in the curve of a turn. You feel it under your knees before you can see it. At headquarters, the system needed certainty: who fired, when, and under whose signature. The depot needed something else: survival measured in trucks that rolled through the night. Between the two hung a rule that fit the parade ground but not the clay. If your sight broke, you waited. If your lieutenant died, you waited. If the fog swallowed the runner with the order, you waited. Waiting in hedgerow country was a kind of speech, an admission you were already late. We had 2 G*NS to cover the bend by the poplars, a bend that turned a column into a file and made armor slow its breath. At dawn the crews were 6 men. By noon the second G*N dragged a broken trail wheel and a prayer. By afternoon it was smoke and rivets. I stayed with the remaining 57, because somebody had to. The crew splintered, one for the aid post, one to carry messages, one simply missing. Dale Jensen, kid from Minnesota with careful hands, stayed. He could load blind, and often did. Our section sergeant left me a last instruction before he went uphill to find a radio that spoke English: hold off unless you get orders. If armor comes, wait for the bazooka team to mark. He touched the splintered sight with 2 fingers, as if blessing a broken saint. Don't do anything stupid, Turner. We can replace a G*N. We can't replace the road. Then he walked into the hedge and did not return. The depot behind us was not a warehouse, it was blood in barrels. Jerry cans, crates, morphine, dry socks, batteries, bread that tasted of burlap. A day's delay meant someone's attack tomorrow became a letter home instead. I had seen what empty roads did to men in the hedgerows: rifles with no clips, medics with no sulfa, drivers sleeping on the wheel because coffee never came. So when I say vital supply route, I mean men breathing. By regulation, the broken sight made the G*N a monument. By physics, the tube still threw steel at 2,800 feet per second. The traverse worked if you bullied it. The elevation will skipped teeth but could be bullied too. The breech locked on the second try if you listened to its mood. I knew the moods of things. It was the only language the front spoke back. You may think rules exist to keep fools from K*ling friends. You would be right. But the hedgerows bred other deaths, the death of ours while a runner hunted an officer, the death that came when a tank nose appeared and found you kneeling by a book. I had watched men follow process like a rope into a well. I had watched an entire lane surrender to a single turret because no one owned the first minute. C Company's slice of France smelled of wet hay, cordite, and manure. We strung phone wire that mated with thorns, and every breath of the line carried gossip, patrol back, mortar short, don't light cigarettes on the eastern face. When the wire went dead, all that was left was guessing and habit. My habit was listening. A sight tells you where. A motor tells you when. So when the afternoon turned to a gray that ate edges, the system said, hold fire, wait for designation, conserve ammunition. The front said, the road bends once, and every tank must bow its head to take it. The choice was not between legal and illegal. It was between a depot breathing and a depot burnt. The rule was a good rule in a flat field. In a hedge, it needed a witness. I had 5 rounds. Armor-piercing capped, 2 with tracer, 2 without, and a single he with a dented band. We stacked them like hours left in a day. Dale looked at the sight, spidered glass, useless, and then at me. We're blind, he said. I told him no. We were deaf only if we chose to be. Regulations were written for eyes. My father had taught me better, trust the sound. Before the war, I could tell the health of an engine by the way it exhaled. I was a mechanic from Toledo, Ohio, Turner and Son Repair, 1 lift, 2 bays, 1 father who believed precision was a kind of prayer. I learned on tractors, the slow American kind that talk to you if you listen. We didn't have instruments for every reading. You knew timing by vibration through the wrench. You knew fuel mix by the color of the smoke. You knew whether something would live another season by how it sighed when it cooled. My father said once, don't trust the gauge, trust the sound. It wasn't poetry. It was survival. The wrong reading could cost a man his hand or his harvest. I carried that with me longer than I carried any uniform. Before the army, my world was grease, rain, and the tick of cooling metal after a job done right. I liked silence more than talk. I liked the moment when a machine stopped shaking and settled into itself. That was truth. When I was drafted in '43, I packed a wrench in my duffel and a family photograph behind it. My mother's letter came 2 days before deployment. Her handwriting was careful, her words small, be careful, Eli. Fix things when you can, even when they say they're beyond repair. At Fort Polk, Louisiana, the air smelled of dust and gasoline. Training was repetition, shouting, and the religion of regulation. We learned the correct stance, the correct range call, the correct words to say before pulling a trigger. The men who wrote the book must have believed war was polite. They didn't know what happens when wind shifts and you can't see your own hands. I remember the first time they handed me the M1 anti-tank G*N. I was supposed to sight, breathe, squeeze. Instead I listened. The recoil mount groaned on one side more than the other. The barrel hissed after firing, a whisper of escaping gas. I told the instructor it needed relapping. He laughed like I'd made a joke. You're not fixing tractors anymore, Turner. These are Army issue. They don't break unless you break them. 2 days later, his G*N jammed during drill. He blamed the loader. I said nothing. They mocked my stance too. I didn't line the sight the way they wanted. I'd close one eye, tilt my head, and listen as I adjusted. The sergeant said, you're supposed to see, not hear. I said, if you're hearing it right, you'll see it right. He called me the philosopher of the firing line. But I always hit. Not always fast, not always pretty, but true. Every round within inches. The difference between regulation and instinct is only visible when things start to break. They sent me overseas because the army needed men who could make a dead G*N breathe again. England first, training, rain, tea so weak you could see the bottom of the cup. Then Normandy. We landed behind armor, mud so thick it pulled your boots off if you didn't time your steps. The first week, I fixed more axles than I fired shells. The second week, I stopped counting. In June, we pushed inland, hedgerow by hedgerow. The front wasn't a line, it was a pulse, expanding and collapsing. Every day, a new report, some victory, some retreat, all soaked in weather. By July, I was guarding roads instead of taking them. The depot near Saint-Marcel became our anchor point. It looked nothing like a target, just farm sheds stacked with jerry cans, sandbags, and a radio that hissed more than it spoke. The nights there were mechanical. You heard gears more than voices. The groan of engines cooling, the hiss of boiling coolant, the cough of exhaust backfire echoing through fog. I used to sit with my back to the G*N and listen to the night breathe. Somewhere out there, the war was moving closer, link by link. My crew, 5 men before the shelling, treated me like the old man though I was only 25. I knew their habits. Jensen chewed coffee grounds, Stokes hummed hymns, Miller never wore his helmet. Then came July 8th, the day everything went wrong and right together. We were dug in along the farm road, 2 G*NS covering opposite fields. Around noon, mortar fire found us. The first hit the tree line, scattering bark like shrapnel. The second hit closer. The third took the other crew entirely. Smoke and soil, then quiet. When it cleared, I could hear birds again, which was worse than the shells. I remember thinking the wind had changed direction. It carried the scent of diesel, not ours. German engines, maybe a mile off. I checked the sight, cracked, useless. The manual said to wait for replacement. The radio said nothing. Dale stood beside me, his hands shaking as he tried to rethread a shell casing back into the crate, something to do with his fingers. We waited an hour. Nothing came. Another hour. Just the smell growing thicker. I thought about the letter in my pocket, about what fix things when you can meant when the thing was a G*N and the fixing meant breaking rules. In those pauses, men reveal themselves. Some pray, some smoke, some plan escape routes. I listened. Underneath the wind, faint, rhythmic, treads. Not many yet, but coming. The manual said not to engage. The road said otherwise. By nightfall, Dale asked, "You think they'll come this way?" I said yes, because everything valuable in war eventually attracts steel. I cleaned the breach, not because I had orders but because I needed something that made sense. Metal, oil, function. The world reduced to what could be tightened and fired. When I finished, I sat with my back against the G*N and listened to the insects return. The sound was fragile, temporary. I thought of my father's shop in summer, the hum of cicadas mixing with the tick of cooling motors. I could almost smell home, rubber, oil, sweat, and for a moment, the war was a distant engine idling somewhere in the dark, waiting for someone to decide whether to start it or let it die. At Fort Polk they had laughed first, then shouted. The range sergeant barked my name so hard it left an echo in the pine trees. "Turner. Your stance looks like you're watering crops." They called me farmer 4 months. I didn't mind. Farmers listen before they act. During live-fire drills I ignored the sighting posture written in the manual. Instead of squaring shoulders and aligning eye to reticle, I leaned in from the left, one knee in the dirt, ear close enough to hear the bolt cycle. I adjusted by sound, the faint scrape when the carriage caught, the click of true lock. Each noise carried information the glass couldn't show. The sergeant accused me of guessing. But guesswork doesn't hit center 5 times in a row at 500 yards. After the 3rd day he stopped shouting. After the 5th he said quietly, "You'll get yourself K*lead when the real G*NS start talking." Maybe he was right. But I never missed. The contradiction followed me to France like a shadow, discipline versus instinct, ink versus mud. When the G*N sight shattered outside Saint-Marcel, the argument ended. No sight, no rule left to break. Only a choice, obedience or logic. We had dug in behind a stone barn roofed with tin, holes like constellations punched through it. The morning rain turned the road into pulp. Every sound carried. Somewhere beyond the next hedgerow, engines idled, their rhythm uneven, the German way of feathering throttles to keep plugs from fouling. To headquarters, that was intelligence to be logged. To me, it was a heartbeat getting closer. Regulations said, cease operation until equipment is serviceable. Meaning wait. Meaning die. I'd seen what waiting did to other crews. One village west of Corentin, an entire battery obeyed the letter of that rule. Sight fogged. They signaled for replacement optics, waited 4 hours. By the time the new glass arrived, so had the Panzers. We found the G*NS later, barrels bent, men fused to breeches by heat. The paperwork said, loss due to enemy superiority. I knew better. Loss due to faith in paper. So when I checked the cracked lens that night and saw two halves of the same horizon split by a hairline of silver, I understood what the manual could never teach. Sometimes a rule is just a prayer for control in a world built on chaos. Still, part of me hesitated. Habit runs deep. Orders are armor, disobedience is exposure. But there was no officer left to authorize courage. Only Dale and me, crouched behind sandbags that smelled of mildew, listening to an army approach. He whispered, "You really think we'll see armor?" I said, "We'll hear it first." Then, softly, "And we won't wait this time." I remember the fog seeping through the trees, pale and slow. Every shape blurred. The cows in the nearby field had broken through a fence earlier, their tracks mixed with tank prints until the earth itself looked confused. Above us, telephone wire sagged under rain, humming faintly with stray current from some broken generator at the depot. The world felt like a machine about to seize. I cleaned the G*N again, ritual more than maintenance. The breech block slid smoother than it had any right to. When metal is cold enough, friction forgets itself. I could feel every scratch under my fingertips, every scar from previous engagements. Those grooves were history, not damage. The army would call the piece unserviceable. I called it experienced. Somewhere in the dark, a flare went up, dull red, German pattern. They were marking the route. Through the crack in the hedge I saw the glow reflect off wet leaves. 5 minutes later came the first rattle of tracks crossing gravel. The rulebook said to report movement, not engage. But the radio had gone silent hours before, and the wire line was likely cut. I thought of the sergeant at Polk, of his voice cracking against the southern heat, "Follow the sight, follow the order." And I thought of my father, sleeves rolled to the elbow, leaning over a misfiring engine, "Listen first. 2 doctrines, 1 future." Dale watched me trace the split glass with my thumb. He said, "It's busted." I said, "It still points." He didn't argue. He just began checking shells, wiping each with a rag as if cleanliness could save us. At that moment I realized disobedience wasn't rebellion, it was maintenance of reality. Rules were designed for when the machine ran smoothly. But war, like every engine, wears down. Sometimes you have to bypass the governor to keep it running. When the first tank backfired in the distance, I could feel it through my boots. A deep, hollow pop that rolled through the mud. They were closer than command believed. Closer than the maps dared admit. The depot slept behind us under a sheet of mist, full of fuel, morphine, and men who thought safety was a coordinate. The contradiction, the same one that had followed me since Polk, tightened into a single line: wait and watch the road burn, or act and be wrong in the right way. I placed my palm flat on the barrel, feeling the chill. A tool doesn't care about orders, it only waits for pressure. The cracked sight caught a glint of moonlight, scattering it into 2 images of the same world. One obeyed, one survived. I had not yet chosen, but in truth the choice had already been made the first time I hit center while everyone else was following the book. The rain began soft, almost kind, the kind that hides its edge until it's too late. By afternoon, the road to Saint-Marcel had turned to clay. Tires sank, boots vanished, and every ditch became a mirror reflecting gray sky. The hedgerows steamed like living walls. Through that gray came the hum, low, steady, layered. Engines. 10 of them, maybe more. It wasn't the rhythm of trucks. This was weight on treads, the kind that carried its own gravity. Each vibration had tone, the quick metallic chatter of half-tracks, the slower, chest-deep growl of tanks. I checked the compass, then the road. They were coming from the east, from the forest that smelled of iron and wet leaves. Dale crouched beside me, his helmet tilted forward, rain dripping from the rim. He said nothing for a long time. Then, quietly, "We're blind, Eli." He was right. The cracked sight caught nothing but fog and reflection. I could have been aiming at ghosts. I exhaled slow. "Then we listen." He didn't argue. He had seen what listening had done before. The engines paused. The sound rolled, broke apart, reformed. It meant they had stopped to tighten formation, armor first, transport behind, maybe a fuel truck somewhere in the line. Standard German discipline. They would follow the road, cross the small bridge by the orchard, and turn toward the depot. If they reached it, the trucks behind us, dozens of them, would ignite like dry grass. Regulations offered two paths: withdraw and preserve the G*N, or wait for orders. But orders were words, and words were slow. The depot was a fact. The road was a fact. Facts outrun orders every time. I slid one of the shells from its crate. Armor-piercing, steel cap slightly rusted, the stamping barely visible. Dale wiped it with his sleeve as if polishing faith. I said, "They'll hit the bridge first. When they do, they'll slow. That's where we start." He looked at me, eyes wide in the half-light. "We can't hit what we can't see." "Maybe not what we can't see," I said, "but what we can hear." He waited for me to laugh. I didn't. The G*N crouched on its trail legs like a tired animal. I adjusted the traverse wheel by feel, the gear skipped twice, then caught. The barrel faced the dip in the road where water pooled, a place I knew by instinct more than sight. Tanks would funnel there, they always did. Mud and narrow ground forced discipline into single file. Behind us, the depot was silent. The men there trusted that someone else held the line. That someone else was two men and a damaged G*N. Dale whispered, "Procedure says fall back." "Procedure doesn't know this mud," I said. "We move, we bog down. Then we're scrap before we find dry ground." He looked west toward the depot, then east toward the unseen column. "So what's the plan?" "Wait," I said, "for the right sound." We waited. 10 minutes. 20. Rain thickened until it became a curtain. I could smell diesel now, sharp and heavy. Somewhere ahead, a tank gear slipped, screeched, caught again. They were closer than I wanted to believe. When the first turret broke the fog, I saw it only as a shape, a darker gray against gray. The Panzer's hull glistened with rain, tracks biting deep into mud. Another followed. Then another. "Holy Christ," Dale muttered. I counted under my breath, 1, 2, 3, 4, by the time I reached 10, I stopped. The lead tank slowed as it approached the small bridge. The bridge was old stone, barely wider than the road. Its foundation sat on a soft embankment we had shelled last week to clear a blockage. I remembered how loose the soil had been afterward, how the water from the orchard ditch seeped underneath. An idea came quiet, complete. I aimed not at the tank but at the bank beneath it. Dale saw the angle and frowned. "That's dirt, Eli. It's support." He hesitated. "The manual." "Doesn't hear the ground," I said. The sound of treads vibrated through my knees. I could tell the exact moment the tank's weight settled onto the bridge. The timbre deepened, metal echoing through stone. That was the second to pull the trigger. I adjusted 2 degrees down, held my breath, and fired. The recoil slammed through my shoulder, a violent, familiar handshake. The world lit in white smoke. The shell hit beneath the bridge. For a heartbeat nothing happened. Then the earth moved. A hollow crack, a gasp of soil collapsing. The lead tank's right track sank, metal shrieking against rock. The whole vehicle slid sideways into the ditch. Its turret twisted upward, cannon useless, blocking the road like a fallen gate. Dale's eyes widened. "You hit it." "Didn't have to," I said. "The road did." Behind the wreck, the column halted. Engines revved, gears clanked. Confusion rippled backward. "Load again," I said. He hesitated only a moment before obeying. "That's not in the manual." "Neither surviving." The second shell slid home with a metallic kiss. I listened again. The pattern of idling changed, another tank shifted into reverse to clear space. Its track clattered against the stuck one. Perfect alignment for a crossfire that would never come. I squeezed the trigger. The explosion tore the air. Flame rolled through fog. I felt the heat on my face. One tank crippled, another jammed behind it, the entire column trapped by a single guess that wasn't a guess at all. Smoke drifted toward us, carrying the scent of burning oil and rain-soaked earth. Dale grinned, teeth white in the dim light. 2 shells, he said. 8 left. 5, I corrected. We'll need 3 for luck. He laughed once, a short, stunned sound. Through the smoke I could see them moving, half-tracks pulling up, men dismounting, silhouettes darting. The battle hadn't begun yet, it was just starting to understand itself. And in that instant, amid rain, engines, and fire, I realized the rulebook had ended. From here on, only the laws of sound and consequence applied. The smell of burning oil clung to the fog, thick as tar. Every drop of rain hissed when it struck the wrecked Panzer, steam rising like breath from an animal still alive. The road ahead was chaos, metal grinding against mud, shouts in German cutting through the gray. Somewhere down the column, an officer was screaming orders no one could hear. Dale handed me the next shell. His gloves were slick. "They'll flank us," he said. "Not yet." He swallowed hard, glanced at the broken sight. "You're guessing again." "I'm listening." The G*N groaned as I traversed the barrel 5 degrees left, enough to cover the embankment beyond the wreck. The second tank's engine revved higher, too high. He was trying to climb the side of the ditch to bypass the fallen lead. The track slipped, bit, and slipped again. Every turn chewed the mud deeper. "Hold it," I whispered. The sound peaked, a whine under strain. I fired. The shell disappeared into the fog. Then a sound like the earth snapping in half. The explosion tore through the bank, lifting the Panzer onto its side. It rolled once, belly up, smoke gushing from the vents. The heat reached us in waves. Dale shouted, "Jesus! Load again." He obeyed without thinking. The third shell was different, high explosive, the one with a dented band. I had been saving it for soft targets, but there was no soft left in this war. Through the smoke I could make out movement, men running between vehicles, trying to uncouple trailers. One of them carried a satchel charge. I could almost feel his heartbeat through the air. I aimed low, where the ground met the wheels of a fuel truck at the rear of the convoy. The trigger pull felt like tearing a page from my own life. The shell struck the truck. For a second, nothing, just a dull thud, as if the world inhaled. Then the fire rolled out, bright and slow, like liquid sunlight spilling over the road. The blast wave hit us seconds later, shaking the wall, showering stone dust over our helmets. When my hearing returned, all I could catch was the high whine of ruptured metal and men shouting in panic. Dale leaned over the shield, eyes wide. "You hit their fuel." "Good," I said, voice flat. The fourth round went into the Panther trying to reverse around the mess. Its armor was heavier, angled. I compensated by feel, not by sight. The first *T glanced off, the second found a seam near the turret ring. The explosion folded the tank inward like paper. Each blast echoed through the valley. I could feel the ground answering back, the vibration running up through my knees, through the G*N, through my ribs. It was the rhythm of consequence. The return fire began, wild, panicked. Machine G*NS tore the hedges, tracers slicing orange lines through the rain. A shell hit somewhere behind us, throwing clods of mud into the air. Shrapnel clanged off the G*N shield. Dale ducked. I didn't. "Reload," I said. He reached for another, hands shaking. "How many left?" "1." He looked at me like that number was a sentence. The smoke from the fuel truck had spread across the road, turning the entire scene into a flickering nightmare. Shadows moved inside it, men shouting, engines struggling, silhouettes stumbling. One of the half-tracks caught fire from the spill, ammunition cooking off inside like popcorn. I felt strangely calm. My father once said every machine has a sound it makes right before it breaks. I could hear that sound now, stretched across the valley, the thin, rising whine of engines starving for air. The last shell sat in my lap. Dale stared at it as though it might explain something. "We pull back now, right?" I didn't answer. I was listening again. Amid the roaring fire and shouting, a single deeper tone emerged, the heavy idle of a tiger. They had sent one to clear the blockage. Its main G*N could split our position in half with a single round. But the tiger's weakness was its confidence. It moved like a fortress, slow and sure, trusting its armor more than its caution. I watched its shadow advance through the smoke, a dark wall on treads. When it reached the collapsed bridge, it stopped to orient. That hesitation was all the space I needed. I couldn't see it clearly, but I could hear it, engine cycling between gears, tracks clanking as the driver tested the ground. The sound bounced off the ditch, giving me its position within yards. "Elevation 10 degrees, I muttered. "Traverse 2 left." Dale obeyed, trusting the tone of my voice more than the order itself. I pressed the trigger. The final round left the barrel with a cough instead of a roar. The blast lit the fog orange. Then a deeper thunder followed, metal rupturing from inside out. When the smoke thinned, the tiger was listing forward, turret sagged, fire leaking from its seams. Behind it, the rest of the convoy was a ruin of twisted steel and rising flame. We had done it, one broken G*N against 10 machines of war. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was rain tapping the metal and the slow crackle of fire devouring the road. Dale finally exhaled. "They'll write this up, you know. They'll say it was a lucky sh*T. Maybe." He looked at me. "What'll you say?" "That luck sounds a lot like diesel," I said. "The silence after battle has a texture. It's heavier than noise. You can feel it pressing against your ears, waiting for the next mistake." I stood, hand still resting on the G*N's cold barrel, and realized I wasn't shaking. I should have been. Down the slope, the German column was nothing but silhouettes and smoke. The depot behind us was safe, for now. The rulebook lay somewhere under the mud, and I didn't plan to dig it up. "Eli," Dale whispered, almost afraid to break the quiet, "what now?" I looked at the wreckage, the black rain falling through the glow, and said, "Now we listen. There'll be more." He nodded slowly, as if understanding that listening was all we had left between one breath and the next. The battle was over. The war was not. Silence pressed in after the last blast, the kind that makes your ears ring with their own blood. I reached for the final shell and felt nothing. My hands were air. A hard light passed over us and then the ground came apart, mortar, close. The wall lifted, the world turned, and I remember Eli's mouth forming a word I couldn't hear. Then smoke swallowed the sentence. I woke on my back in the ditch with rain on my face and gravel in my teeth. The G*N still pointed down the road like a finger that refused to unclench. The air tasted of cordite and wet iron. I called for Eli and got the cough of a man who's run too far. No answer. The fog thinned and thickened in slow breaths. Flames moved inside it like animals. I found him 2 steps from the trail leg, half curled the way a mechanic folds when he slides under a chassis. His eyes were open. His helmet was gone. A shard of metal had taken the argument out of him forever. I set my hand on his shoulder and it was already cooling. He had the look of someone still listening. The road beyond was a broken column, tank wedged in the ditch, another on its side, a fuel truck buckling as its ribs collapsed. Ammunition popped from the half-track like hard rain on a hot stove. Somewhere down the line a crew tried to turn a turret that no longer had a mind to move. They shouted for orders that wouldn't come. The fire kept answering. I don't remember deciding to move, I remember my legs arguing and losing. I dragged the tarpaulin from the crate and covered Eli's chest and throat, tucking the edges as if weather could be kept back by neat corners. I wanted to say a thing fit for church. What came out was what we had left, you did it. The depot sent nobody, the depot was waiting to be saved. The wire was cut. The road between us and them was a corridor through heat and blind shooting. I crawled to the breach and checked it out of habit. Empty. The traversing gear had a tooth missing we hadn't noticed. The elevation wheel was warm. The G*N smelled like work. The second mortar fell wide, plowing a furrow in the field. I felt the thud in my ribs. I counted seconds the way Eli counted harmonics. 1, 2, 3, nothing. No battery bracketing us, just a scout tube feeling for life. I lay still, cheek to mud, and tried to hear through the burning. In the noise I found it, that low, tired idle of engines that don't know whether to advance or reverse. They were stuck. They were afraid of our 1G*N because they didn't know it had gone silent. I picked up the range card, soaked and torn, the pencil lines smearing into gray ghosts. Eli's thumbprint was on the margin. I put it flat on the shield and let it cling there, a map that no longer mattered to anyone but me. Reinforcements came like men walking into a dream they didn't expect to find true. First a squad from the depot, eyes wide and rifles low, then a half-dozen more from C Company who had followed the smoke to its source. They stopped when they saw the column, as if the road had told a joke too large to laugh at. An officer with rain in his eyelashes said, "Who gave this order?" I said, "No one." He listened. It sounded wrong in my mouth, but it was all I had. They fanned out, checked the hedges, put rounds into shadows to make the living declare themselves. A medic knelt by Eli and did what medics always do even when they know, hand to throat, glance to eyes, the stillness after. He drew the tarp up higher. "I'm sorry," he said, "to me or to the air." We counted wrecks. For dead iron, 1 crippled and hissing, 2 more abandoned at angles that spoke of hurry. The bridge was a mouth with a broken tooth. The mud had our fingerprints in it where the road gave way. When the column of our own finally growled up from the west, trucks, a wrecker, a jeep with the radio that actually answered, there was a moment of theater. Men put hands on hips and tried to arrange their faces into something that fit the report they knew they'd have to write. The officer asked again, quieter this time, "Who directed fire?" I looked at the tarp. "Private Eli Turner," I said. "He used unregulated methods." The phrase felt like packaging. The truth was simpler, he aimed at the ground because the ground was the hinge. They made notes. They measured the angle of the toppled tank, sketched the place where the bridge had slumped, collected a shard or two as if the metal could hold a reason. Somebody took the cracked sight off the G*N and turned it in his hands like a broken watch. He said, "No optics." I said, he had better. They wanted times. I gave them sound instead, the pitch when the lead track settled, the shift when the second tank committed to the bank, the hollow gulp before the fuel went. One lieutenant tried to hide his impatience, then stopped trying. "We'll need something we can put in a ledger," he said. I thought of Eli's father's advice he'd told me by the fire once, "Don't trust the gauge, trust the sound." It wouldn't fit in a ledger either. We loaded him onto the jeep with the same care we gave the ammunition. I rode in back, one hand on the tarp because I didn't know what else to hold. As we passed the depot, drivers looked up with grease on their faces and questions in their throats. The road behind them was open. The road behind me was still burning. At the aid station a captain I'd never seen wrote a sentence that knew how to salute itself. Private Turner acted without orders using unregulated firing methods. His actions prevented enemy armor from breaching the Saint-Marcel supply line. No metal could describe aim by thunder. Paper found its own comfort. They asked for next of kin. I gave the names. I gave the town. I gave the kind of silence that follows a man home whether he walks or rides. They told me there might be words later. I thought, there will be a road later. It will need guarding again. That night I cleaned the breach with hands that wouldn't stop trying to be useful. The G*N clicked and sighed like it missed him. In the pauses I could almost hear his voice, calm as a plumb line, elevation by ear. Traverse by weight. Fire when the road speaks back. I slept behind sandbags that smelled of mildew and rain. I dreamed of a shop in Ohio where a man taught his son to listen to machines. In the morning I woke to engines that were ours, carrying bread and gauze through a bend that no longer K*led. That was the measure. Not the note. Not the ledger. The living trucks. He aimed wrong, they'll say. I know better. He aimed where war actually lives, soil, friction, timing. He broke the rule that had already broken us, and the road breathed because of it. They buried him on a hill that faces the sea. Brittany American Cemetery, rows of white that look like a regiment at attention even when the wind tries to move them. I stood at grave beat 41 with mud on my cuffs and the smell of burned diesel still in my nose. The chaplain's words were clean, the day was not. I remember the sound more than the shape of it: gulls, flag halyard tapping a hollow pole, and somewhere inland a tractor coughing on cold fuel. I thought, he would have known the fix for that. His mother's letter arrived 2 days later, forwarded through a chain of hands that had more blood than ink on them. Be careful, Eli. Fix things when you can, even when they say they're beyond repair. I read it twice and folded it into my pocket. I didn't send it home. It felt wrong to put her words on a ship that moved slower than grief. The report turned his disobedience into a paragraph that fit. Private Eli Turner acted without orders using unregulated firing methods. His actions prevented enemy armor from breaching the Saint-Marcel supply line. There was no line for how he aimed: at soil, at stress, at the hinge where weight becomes failure. Paper keeps clean what the road dirties. Months later, after we pushed past the hedges and left their low, green rooms to history, a rumor reached us from stateside. At Fort Sill, in a classroom with blackboards still scarred by old artillery mathematics, an instructor chalked a phrase: Turner's method, unregulated aiming under pressure. Students snorted when they heard it, then they listened. The lesson was simple and unforgivable: when optics die and orders fail, use the ground as a *P***N, aim for supports, not symbols. Collapse the problem so the enemy collapses with it. I wrote to that instructor when the war let me breathe long enough to hold a pen. I told him what you already know: it wasn't theory. It was listening. He replied with a one-page note that sounded like a range command: thank you for the particulars. We will teach it as contingency, not doctrine. That was right. You can't order a man to break orders. You can only teach him where sanity ends and responsibility begins. Back in France, the locals kept their own record. The farmer whose orchard watched our fire renamed the bend Chemin du Terreur Solitaire, the road of the lone G***ner. I walked it once before we shipped east, boots sinking in the same mud that had betrayed a Panzer's weight. A boy on a bicycle rode past with bread in a basket and looked at me like men look at mechanics, someone who might fix what matters. I didn't deserve it. Eli did. Every July they bring wildflowers, the bright, simple kind that grow from nothing but water and stubbornness. Children lay them along the ditch where the first tank slid. They don't know why the adults are quiet there. They don't know a cracked site, a wet embankment, and a choice older than the rulebook met on that road and decided an hour's worth of lives. They know only the shape of gratitude, which is a small bouquet and a silence. I kept one thing: the broken optic. I asked a supply sergeant to look the other way and slipped it into my kit. Years later, when the oil under my nails belonged to peacetime engines again, I set that sight on a shelf above a bench vise. When a carburetor wouldn't settle or a bearing sang that high, thin note that means ruin is near, I'd glance up. Two halves of a horizon, never meeting. It reminded me that instruments are promises, not guarantees. We grow old around the sounds we won't forget. For me it's the hollow crack of an embankment letting go, the sigh a big engine makes when pride meets physics, and the small, decisive click of a breech that knows its work. When new men asked me what Eli did, I told them he recognized where the world actually breaks. Not on armor. On ground. Not in manuals. In minutes. They asked if he was a hero. I said he was a mechanic with a rifleman's patience and a clockmaker's ear. Hero is a word metals understand. The road understands leverage. The army sent his mother a flag and a letter that knew how to stand straight. I sent her only one sentence and the cracked sight wrapped in oiled cloth: he aimed where it would matter most. She wrote back in a hand steadier than mine: he always did. The package came home with a postal scar, as if distance itself had argued and lost. Sometimes I wake with the rain of that day in my ears and the smell of wet hedges in my throat. I hear him say it the way he said all important things: without hurry, if I get one sh*T. I'll make it count. He did. The depot breathed. Trucks rolled through night. Somewhere a medic had gauze because a man in mud said the manual ends here. There's a marker now at the bend, small and unassuming, the brass gone dull with salt air. It doesn't name him. It names a moment, Jewel at 1944, route tenue. The road held. That's what he fixed. That's what remains. I still hear it sometimes, the road, not the battle. When the wind shifts through fields or a truck backfires in the distance, the sound folds time. July 9th never really ends, it only hides behind other days. Years later, after the war had traded its smoke for silence, I went back. Saint-Marcel was rebuilt in the small, stubborn way French villages know, stone by stone, wall by wall. The orchard had grown back. The bridge we collapsed was replaced by concrete, smooth, soulless, efficient. The new road cut cleaner lines through the valley, but I could still trace the old one by the shape of the ground, the memory in its slope. They had paved over the ditch where Eli fell. I knew it only by the way the grass refused to grow straight. I stood there with my hand in my pocket, fingers wrapped around the broken site. I had carried it through occupation, through discharge, through a decade of peace that felt less honest than war. The glass was cloudy now, edges chipped, but it still split the world in two, what you can see, and what you must believe. A farmer came by leading a mule. He nodded at the place where the road bent. Chemin du terreur solitaire, he said softly. I asked him if people still remembered the story. He shrugged. We know someone stopped them here, he said. That is enough. That was all it ever needed to be, one man and one decision at the right second in the wrong war. At home in Ohio, I worked again with engines. The noise comforted me. When a piston knocked, I could trace the fault to its source. Machines told the truth if you listened. Men didn't. Customers wanted repairs fast and cheap, not explanations about harmonics or the feel of metal before it cracks. So I fixed what I could and left the rest. Sometimes a boy from the neighborhood would stand by the shop door, watching. I'd hand him a wrench and tell him the same thing Eli's father once told him, don't trust the gauge, trust the sound. The boy would smile, thinking it a trick. He never knew it was a prayer. Letters came from France every few years, veterans groups, memorial committees, sometimes a schoolteacher asking for details of the action at Saint-Marcel. They wanted dates, units, numbers. I gave them what paper could bear. But I never mentioned how Eli aimed. Some things lose their weight when they're explained. One year, 1964, they invited me to the unveiling of a stone marker near the bend. I went. The ceremony was simple. Children placed wildflowers. A bugler played something slow and old. The mayor spoke in French I half understood, he fought alone, but not for himself. Then a girl read from a note, Eli's letter home, the one they'd found folded in his footlocker, they want us to aim by the book, Ma. But books don't feel the wind. I felt the air shift around those words. The crowd didn't move, just breathed together. Even the veterans, men who had forgotten more noise than most people ever hear, bowed their heads. I realized then what Eli had really done. He hadn't broken a rule, he had translated it. He turned regulation into rhythm, orders into instinct. He had done what every soldier hopes, to make the impossible feel inevitable. After the ceremony, I stayed behind. The others drove back to the village for wine and speeches. I sat on the new bridge, looking down into the water that had once been mud and fire. The stones were different, but the current sounded the same. You can always tell a river by its pitch. I imagined Eli kneeling beside the G*N, hearing the world the way a mechanic hears a motor, every vibration a truth. The sun dropped behind the hedges, and the wind came cold off the coast. I took the broken sight from my coat and set it on the parapet. For a long time I just watched it catch the last light, two fractured reflections of the same sunset. Then I left it there. Maybe some boy would find it years later and wonder what it had seen. Maybe he'd hold it to his eye and notice how it splits the world, how the real line is never straight. On the flight home, the stewardess asked if France had changed much. I told her no. War doesn't change ground, it changes the men who walk on it. She smiled politely, not understanding, and moved on. I looked out the window and thought about the bend, the rain, the sound of diesel in fog. I'm old now. The hand that once steadied shells shakes when I pour coffee. The sound of thunder still makes me check the horizon. My neighbors think it's the weather that keeps me up. It isn't. It's the silence after the last sh*t, the weight that falls when the world waits for someone to act and no one else can hear what must be done. If there's a lesson, it's not heroism. It's calibration. Between fear and reason, between order and instinct, there's a narrow band where things work. Eli lived there. He listened there. That's why the G*N answered him when logic said it shouldn't. When I die, they'll bury me beside my wife in Toledo. Plain stone, no inscription but name and date. But I asked my nephew to carve a small symbol under the date, a broken circle, like a cracked sight. If anyone ever asks what it means, maybe he'll tell them, it's the sound of a man who aimed wrong and kept the road alive. That's how it ends. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe every time the wind moves through Saint-Marcel, it carries a note of that day, a hum beneath the fields, the memory of treads halted by mud and will. The manuals will keep teaching precision. The world will keep rewarding obedience. But somewhere, in the space between rule and ruin, one voice will whisper what saved us all. Listen first. He aimed wrong, by every line of regulation, by every printed word the army ever trusted. But the road held. The depot breathed. And men who never knew his name lived to see another sunrise. History keeps its ledgers clean. It will mark coordinates, calibers, the number of shells fired. It won't mention the pause before the trigger, or how he found his target in the sound of rain on metal. Somewhere in France, the wind still passes through hedgerows that once burned. Children drop wildflowers where the bridge once broke. They don't know the man who stood there. They only know that someone did. He aimed wrong, they'll say. But his aim was truer than the rule. His aim wasn't regulation. It was better.